So GigEasy is building insurance infrastructure for
Mhm.
the gig economy. We sit in between businesses and insurance companies to make their relationships easy and seamless. We have
Got
a
it.
commercial offering allowing them to protect workers on the job as well as provide benefits. We have a health plan, very, very light, that starts as low as $35 for gig workers to at least have an entry level plan to take care of themselves and their families. And then a typical dental and vision plan you would get at any job. And then we also offer commercial insurance, occupational accident insurance, pay as you go for the gig worker.
Welcome to the Rideshare Guy podcast, where you will learn about the rideshare and mobility industry straight from Harry Campbell, who's got over 5 years experience covering the industry and has talked to thousands of drivers. There's no better place to stay up to date, entertained, and educated. So let's dive in.
All right. Rilwan Lawal is a seasoned entrepreneur and founder helping to build and grow the gig economy one startup at a time. Being heavily involved in two gig marketplace startups, he was founder and COO for New, and then product and ops lead for a school bus startup. Rilwan saw firsthand how many gig workers lack benefits and insurance coverage. So knowing that this is critical for the gig economy, he founded GigEasy. So Rilwan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I feel like sometimes I selfishly use these podcasts for my own information. Like, I guess I didn't even know that you worked at a couple gig marketplace startups in the past. I guess we've been so focused on your current company, I might have glossed over that fact. So tell me a little bit about, how you got into the gig economy space.
Yeah, it really just fell on my lap, honestly. It's so funny how one problem leads to another problem and another
Hmm.
problem leads to another problem. I was working at the Boeing company and I had this side hustle managing Airbnb properties, just doing rental
Hmm.
arbitrage. And I would have a bunch of problems with cleaning and I would hire cleaners to, service the properties and sometimes they would show up, sometimes they won't show up, or sometimes they would
Hmm.
be late. And essentially built a cleaning company to service my Airbnb units. We had about 20 units plus across the Seattle area. And we started offering that service to other Airbnb hosts, and it just eventually grew into becoming a marketplace that connects Airbnb homeowners with cleaning contractors. And that's how New was born.
Very cool. So you've been in the gig economy space for a while, and this might be even more embarrassing that, I also worked at Boeing, right?
Yeah, I know that. I know that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I think I might have forgot. I guess we must have never crossed paths at Boeing, but in my former career 10 years ago, apparently I was an aerospace engineer. Now I'm very much retired and probably won't be polishing off that degree anytime soon.
Nice, nice. I mean, it's definitely a good talking point to just always the Boeing market or network is huge. We're spread everywhere.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about your new company, GigEasy. What is it and how'd you come up with the idea for it?
Yeah, so across my past experiences within the gig economy, I had a lot of
Hmm.
conversations with gig workers, just understanding their pain points, learning about how lack of benefits affects their lives on a day-to-day basis. There's actually a particular cleaner that I have in mind whenever I'm building for, like what
Yeah.
would, XYZ do in this situation? And then from a founder perspective, trying to get like insurance to be able to cover the supply side of your marketplace on the job is a nightmare. And it's a nightmare because, the industry has been calibrated for employees for, 100 plus
Hmm.
years. Systems are not in place to service this demographic. So it just seemed like a logical next step for me. I wanted to dive into something that I had at least a strong background in, hence the gig economy.
Yeah.
Insurance was light, but that's stuff you could read up on and learn. So that's what I did. Yeah.
Very cool. So what is GigEasy? What does it do?
So GigEasy is building insurance infrastructure for
Hmm.
the gig economy. We sit in between businesses and insurance companies to make their relationships easy and seamless. We have
Got
a
it.
commercial offering allowing them to protect workers on the job as well as provide benefits.
Got it. So this isn't a service that I, as an Uber driver, would go and sign up for. But if I work for a company that is partnered with, a platform like a, staffing company or, I guess like you said, a cleaning company, and they're partnered with GigEasy, I would be able to sign up for your services.
Exactly. Yes.
Cool. And what type of insurance do you offer?
Yeah, on the benefit side, we have a health plan, very, very light, that starts as low as $35 for gig workers to at least have an entry level plan to take care of themselves and their families. And then a typical dental and vision plan you would get at any job. And then we also offer a commercial insurance, occupational accident insurance, pay as you go for the gig worker.
Got it. So the health plan starts at $35 a month.
Yeah.
Got it. So seems definitely like a pretty inexpensive plan. Is this something that the workers are paying for typically or the platforms are paying for?
So right now we're working with the platforms to put it in front of the
Hmm.
gig workers. The next stage in our evolution is providing, systems that allow these businesses to subsidize it, because you have to be compliant if you're subsidizing
Yeah.
benefits for a gig worker.
Got it. Yeah. So I think one of the interesting things that we've seen with the gig economy is, like you mentioned, right? You're tackling this problem where, if you're an employee, you typically get health benefits, or you get that dental and insurance. And I just got a bill in the mail, if I took both my kids to the dentist, and I got a bill in the mail, and, my pay, I ended up owing $0. I was like, oh, that's pretty sweet, for two kids at the dentist. And, but obviously in the gig economy, you have some benefits, or a lot of benefits around flexibility in your schedule, but you don't get those insurance benefits typically, right? So what have you found from talking to gig workers? Is this something that, kind of everyone needs, or not many people need, or for the ones that it does impact, like, are they willing to pay for it? Like, who do you sort of think, like, who'd you kind of build this product for? What type of workers in the gig economy?
Yeah, I would say like about 30% of the people that work in the gig economy do this full time.
Hmm.
So a lot of times you have the people that obviously do it as a side hustle for,
Yeah.
to supplement their 9 to 5 income. That's fine because they can get their benefits from there. We're really
Hmm.
building for the people that have, dived into the gig economy full time. There's a subset of them that maybe are able to get from their spouse. Maybe their spouse has
Yeah.
a full time job, or maybe if they're under 26, they could still be under their parents' insurance, but there's still a gap there of people that don't really have a place to go to get, full scale benefits.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the challenge is that if they're paying for it directly, right? Gig economy, right? If you're sort of already, kind of making enough just to get by, right? Like the things like insurance for your car, you kind of have to get that, right? It's compulsory. Taxes, you have to pay. What's the adoption rate, or what are the challenges and issues you've had kind of like with things like health insurance, where, you need it, but like at the end of your paycheck, right? At the end of your day, it's sort of like, obviously there's a whole host of expenses that you might have, and it's not technically, well, I mean, I guess technically health insurance is mandatory in some places, but you know what I mean with some of these insurance services.
Yeah, I think when you have to sort of go out on your own
Hmm.
to get these benefits, the adoption is typically pretty low,
Yeah.
because there's that extra nudge you have to have internally to be able to just set that up. But when you get it from someone that's sort of providing you work, say you're for to keep things easy, you're an Uber driver,
Hmm.
and Uber is telling you that we've partnered with XYZ to provide you benefits, you're more likely to hit that button.
Yeah.
We've made the sign up experience extremely
Hmm.
simple, and the more nudges you're able to get, the more likely you are to sign up. And typically you want to sign up you, your family, your spouse, et
Yeah.
cetera, et cetera.
So how does the health plan work? Because I think you mentioned it starts at $35 a month, which is a lot cheaper than any health plan I've ever signed up for. It sounds like a good deal.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, at a base level, from a health perspective, there
Hmm.
are certain things that you need to have, right? You need to be able to see a doctor at least a couple
Yeah.
times a year to get your physicals. You need to be able to talk to someone if you need to. You need to be able to go to an urgent care center. You need to be able to get prescriptions. So at a base level, we're providing the basic necessities to at least know what your problems are,
Mm.
take preventative measures to prevent problems in the future. And then obviously if you want to go deeper into health protection, there are more expensive plans that you could opt for, essentially.
Got it. Okay, cool. And so this is your newest plan, right? The health plan that you've launched?
So this is the existing plan. We have another plan that we're launching in March that we're very excited about. It's called Cashback Health.
Mm.
So essentially, the concept around this plan is most of the time people don't want to purchase health insurance because they have a bad association with
Hmm.
insurance. But this plan essentially reimburses you for health expenses whenever you visit the doctor. So it's not a plan where you're just paying, a large amount of money for a service that you never use. So you pay a minimal amount of money. This plan starts at $50 and goes all the way up to $200, depending on, whatever it is that you're dealing with, or the size of your family. So for example, if you got into a, car accident,
Hmm.
hopefully that never happens to anyone watching this, and you have to go to the hospital, and you were in the hospital for 10 days, and you were charged, call it $500 a night for
Yeah.
your stay. You would pay that, and then, you would submit your receipts, and then you would get reimbursed for that stay in the hospital versus, paying for something that you actually never use. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay, interesting. So what are some of the industries that you're currently partnered with or servicing?
Yeah. So It's interesting when you talk about the gig economy. Most people think Uber, DoorDash, Lyft, which is
Yeah.
fine, but according to research, they actually make up less than 10% of the whole gig economy.
Hmm.
There are a lot of other
Oh, interesting.
industries.
Yeah. What type
Yeah,
of workers make up the gig economy in your mind?
yeah. So there's a fast rising segment in the nursing space. I think COVID accelerated that. So there are a lot of nurses that are going into the gig economy. Last mile delivery is obviously huge. Trucking is huge. And then you have a lot of service workers around like, landscaping, movers, restaurant workers. A lot of these people sort of accumulate to make up the bulk of the gig economy.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, no, I think that's you brought up a good point, right? Because people think about Uber and Lyft and probably delivery drivers too, but nursing is a good one, staffing, truck driving, service workers, right? I mean, really, I actually think that a lot of them are on a similar level. Like you mentioned Airbnb earlier. Airbnb owners, like I think are kind of one big step up, right? Because they own a house, right? Like it's a pretty big difference between owning or renting a car and owning a house. Like I would sort of think of that as more like maybe sharing economy and less gig
Yeah,
economy. I feel like the professions that you mentioned probably have much more similar challenges where like, hey, they need, health insurance, right? They need, kind of like that flexible schedule, right? They want fast pay, right? All the kind of benefits that people have gotten used to in the gig economy. And yeah, definitely. What are some big companies in some of those other spaces that you've been like looking at or tracking or maybe even working with?
yeah. One of the big companies we're working with, a company called Wonolo.
Mm,
They're more generalists, so they place people in a lot of light industrial
mhm,
locations. So if you see like people working at Tesla factories or like Target or
mm.
Walmart, Wonolo is typically serving a lot of those spaces. We have some other smaller companies, like I said, in the nursing space, landscaping, movers, and then we recently closed a platform in the substitute teacher space. Believe
Oh,
it or
cool.
not, they're also 1099s.
Interesting. Well, I can't imagine. There might be some training and education required to be a substitute teacher, but for someone like Wonolo, do you see a lot of crossover between rideshare drivers, delivery drivers? Maybe they do a little Wonolo on the side and take some of these staffing jobs, or maybe they get tired of rideshare driving and move to more of these staffing jobs. How do you sort of see the crossover in the gig economy? Because I imagine that it's a different job with some of these staffing jobs for Wonolo, but you probably get to take your pick. Look at the pay, look at the type of the job, what the requirement, what the schedule is, right? So you still have that kind of cool control and flexibility that people like in the gig economy, right?
Yeah, so we've actually done surveys internally with our users.
Hmm.
About 25% of the users in our platform work on three or more platforms.
Oh, wow.
So they're crossing base between driving platforms and like maybe a warehousing platform, and maybe they could be dog walkers as well. So like the gig
Yeah.
economy is really allowing people to live their truth. Like if you decided you wanted to do this type of job on Tuesday, you could do that, and then on Thursday you could do something completely different. Just
Yeah.
keep your life exciting, essentially.
Yeah, that's interesting because I feel like this was the initial pitch of the gig economy, drive for Uber and deliver for DoorDash during lunch. And I think what we've seen is that a lot of people end up, hey, if you've got a nice newer car, you might drive people, right? If you've got, an e-bike, okay, you can't drive people, you might go more deliveries, right? If you're doing food deliveries and you get a burger and fries in your car and then you try to do a passenger, it kind of stinks up your car, right? So sometimes
Yeah.
it sounds a little bit better on paper than it is in reality. And so I feel like with these other staffing jobs, do you think there's any, right now we're hearing a lot of complaints from Uber and Lyft drivers and delivery drivers, very saturated. There are a lot of drivers out there. There's a lot of competition. So one of the reasons why I was excited to have you on is to talk about some of these other industries, right? Like, hey, maybe there's, maybe not, like I said, maybe not substitute teaching, but, maybe check out Wonolo and some of these staffing opportunities. If you had to kind of pick or highlight a couple of these alternative verticals in the gig economy, where do you think is the most opportunity right now for drivers who want to make the most amount of money?
That's a great question. I mean, I think the last mile delivery space is very interesting, and I
Hmm.
wouldn't say like the the biggest ones. So like, I mean, those are great as well, but there's a lot of other smaller platforms that do a lot of B2B last mile deliveries between businesses, and the payout typically is higher.
Got it.
Um,
Yeah, I know I've heard of companies, like Skipcart that does 7-Eleven
exactly.
deliveries,
That's
Point
that's
Pickup.
that's
Are there
another.
others that are kind of, you never heard of, but do a lot of last mile delivery? Like I think everyone knows DoorDash and Uber Eats, but some of these others are pretty interesting.
Yeah,
Freight is another one, Frayt. We've had Couriel on the podcast before.
I know
Uh,
Curry.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the ones that come to mind for us. I'm thinking if there's any other one that I should be talking to you guys about. Those are the big ones. There are a lot of smaller ones across, like, like certain
Yeah.
demographics, like in Texas or in
Interesting.
Connecticut or
Yeah, no, that's
California.
a good point. We often tell drivers to think about, go on Craigslist or go on Facebook, sort of see who's hiring because there might be local delivery companies, these local last mile delivery, doing probably less on the food side, but, maybe more, tires, whatever, whatever it might be. I think there's a lot of interesting use cases where you have, high value items and people will pay, $50, $100 to kind of
Yeah,
get them transported. So yeah, I
yeah,
like that last, I'm a fan of last mile delivery.
yeah,
So that's a
yeah.
good one. What do you think about these staffing industries? I feel like there's a couple interesting companies like Wanolo and Triba, I think is another one in the staffing space. Do you think that there's a lot of opportunity there?
Yeah, yeah, there's definitely a lot of opportunity. And then they're getting a lot of like specialized staffing marketplaces now that are popping up. So like
Mm,
there's for example, Variable. Variable has been around for a while now, but they're like deep in the manufacturing space. So that's an example of another platform that's not like tied to driving or tied to delivery, but you could
yeah.
sign up and get jobs on demand for higher pay.
Yeah, no, I think it's kind of cool because there are a lot of these alternatives in the gig economy. And then, yeah, definitely if you start adding some specialized skills like substitute teaching or manufacturing, I think that there are more workplaces popping up in the kind of staffing or gig economy space there too. So definitely a lot of opportunity beyond the traditional, big 4 or 5 companies that everyone's heard of and everyone knows their name. I'm curious, so beyond the health plan, the dental, and the vision, are there any sort of unique use cases for some of these staffing or some of these gig companies where you guys are providing a type of insurance that, is maybe, atypical, right? Or maybe as part of a certain gig, they need this special type of insurance and you guys are doing that and, providing it for workers. I imagine like, if I'm operating heavy machinery, maybe I need some special insurance and I can just go work and get it from you automatically, right?
Yeah, yeah. So on the commercial side, we've put together a lot of unique insurance products. So like we
Hmm.
have a lot of our commercial insurance products are pay as you go. So,
Mm,
if you're a business that employs gig workers, you typically would want them to brandish some kind of proof of insurance to be able to take on the
yeah.
job. But a lot of times these people are doing these jobs, they're not doing a lot of them. So
Yeah.
financially, it doesn't make sense for them to purchase a monthly plan. So we're able to fractionalize these insurance
Mm.
plans per hour, per day, per
Yeah, that's
gig.
a really good example. Yeah, if I'm doing a staffing job that requires some type of special insurance and I'm only going to do that job for a day or a week, I don't want to go to some insurance agent and buy. What's a good example of that in real life that you guys have done? Like, what was the type of job or the company and the platform?
Yeah, yeah. So like occupational accident insurance, that's our bread and butter. So that's good for like, if you're doing any type of job that, you could potentially get injured in. So
Mm,
like a perfect example is landscaping. There's,
hmm.
there's a risk of you like, hurting yourself while you're doing somebody's yard, or if you're a mover and you're lifting furniture and you hurt your back, you want to make
Yeah.
sure you have some kind of coverage to protect you for that particular job. And we make that experience seamless for the
Yeah.
business and the insurance
And
company.
so in that situation, who is kind of trying to be protected? Is it the platform? They don't want to be sued by the worker or, the homeowner, right? Doesn't want to be, sued. Like who doesn't want to be sued basically?
Yeah, yeah. So in those instances, the platform is the one getting protected.
Hmm.
And then the bills for the gig worker is also being covered. Another interesting example would be like the cleaning space. So like if you work on a cleaning platform and you're
Yeah.
sending cleaners to someone's property and they break something, who's
Mm,
liable? Who's supposed to cover that charge, right? Making cleaners get a monthly plan
yeah.
for that type of protection can be costly, but if you're fractionalizing it per job, we can make sure that
Hmm.
if you break a vase that's worth like maybe $500, you can
Yeah.
make sure that the owner of that house is reimbursed for that activity.
Yeah. Do any of, I guess they would sort of be, customers of these platforms require special types of insurance? Like if you come in and you're going to be moving, I guess like you said, like very valuable stuff and I don't want you to break it, right? Like if I go and hire some guy off Craigslist and he moves, a bunch of stuff around and breaks it, like what am I going to do? Sue this guy off of Craigslist? Probably not, right? Like I guess I could potentially, if they were coming from a platform, I might sue the platform so the platform would want to be protected. Or, if I'm a customer, I would say, I don't want to sue anyone. I just want this to be covered, if something bad that happens, right? So I guess I could see customers also requiring, additional insurance in some of these, kind of gig economy cases.
Yeah, I mean it's more of a sales it's more sales language for the
Hmm.
platforms. So like, at the bottom of every checkout, they say each job is insured up to X amount of dollars so that
Yeah.
the customer has that faith in that if anything goes wrong, that they're protected and they're covered. And we provide that. We provide the businesses the ability to put those types of language on their website.
Got it. So you've mentioned that you guys have, had some success or done partnerships in the past with Manolo and a substitute teaching company. What are some of the other verticals that you've worked with or that you're kind of really excited about going into this year?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity in the manufacturing space,
Hmm.
the construction space. We're developing products for last mile delivery platform. So we have working on a non-owned hired plan on a pay
Hmm.
as you go basis to cover like any damages that's done to someone's car while they're doing a last mile delivery,
Interesting.
making sure the platform is protected, making sure the third party is protected, and also the driver is protected. And we could
Yeah.
fractionalize that per mile, essentially, because that's the frequency of how we're tracking.
Yeah, that's a good one because a lot of people, I think, are very surprised that, with the big platforms when it comes to delivery, the insurance is very lacking. With some of the biggest platforms on the delivery side, there's no insurance, right? If you get into an accident, you're literally on your own, and there's very few companies that would actually cover it. There's basically a bunch of almost all delivery drivers are out there, like basically technically, without
Yeah.
insurance, which is kind of a
Yeah.
crazy situation. So that's for sure cool to hear. So we've talked about gig workers, gig economy a lot. I wanted to get your take on something that's topical in the news. And, basically it is well, I'll read the title of this article. Millions of gig workers could qualify as employees under new Biden era rule. A new Labor Department rule out this week aims to make it easier for millions of low wage workers to get employee benefits and other protections. I feel like this is right up your alley. And, this whole employee versus independent contractor debate, I feel like it comes up, every presidential cycle, every few years, and like definitely no signs of slowing, when it comes to this debate. So maybe you could break down this rule change and kind of what it means, how you're thinking about it. Basically tell us like what is Biden's new rule? What can it mean for gig workers?
Yeah, I mean, it's when you dig into it, it's really not a new rule. It's an old rule that was overturned. So this rule existed, as far back as like the
Mm,
30s. It was overturned about 4 or 5 years ago, and then they're essentially bringing it back. There's a 6 point checklist that every company needs to track to identify whether a company or a worker falls under
hmm.
W-2 or 1099. It's a series of things around how the work is policed, whether or not the worker has control over their schedule, how
Hmm.
much they charge, who's in charge of purchasing equipment. All of these things sort of accumulate to where this worker falls. And if a lot of those things are being controlled by the employer, then they would fall under the W-2. And if they have the independence, they would be a 1099 worker. I think what is interesting is if you fall under the W-2 bucket and you're being mandated to provide benefits, how does that work knowing that, that worker is also doing 3 or 4
Yeah.
other gigs on an ongoing basis? So there's a mismatch between what the law is and how it can be executed on. Ideally with GigEasy, once we have that functionality to allow businesses to subsidize benefits
Hmm.
fractionally, it'll sort of be that midpoint between allowing the workers to get the benefits that they need while, allowing the businesses to offer benefits compliantly and not at a crazy cost, knowing that, the worker is doing like a multiple other gigs. So for
Yeah.
example, a perfect example would be if someone works on your platform like 10 hours a
Hmm.
month, but you're policing everything that they're doing. And so they fall into the employee bucket. How do you cover them for benefits that's, tied to the actual amount of
Yeah.
work that they're doing on your platform? So we're allowing people to fractionalize
Hmm.
subsidies for their gig workers, essentially.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, I think that, a lot of people tend to overlook, right? They kind of want the best of both worlds, right? They're like, oh, I want to set my own schedule and work for all these different companies. If you become an employee, I imagine, if I had an employee, I wouldn't want him working for my top competitor, right? I would say, hey, don't go work for them. Just work for me. Here's when you need to work. Here's where you need to work, right? So that I think obviously that might be a better situation for some people, but there are definitely going to be trade-offs, right? Like what's the saying? You can't have your cake and eat it too. And, I think that in this Washington Post article, they cited Lyft spokesperson and Uber, they cited the studies that say drivers overwhelmingly want to be independent contractors. And, we've run studies that I think for the most part, I think it's pretty much well agreed upon that a majority of gig workers want to stay independent contractors, because for all the, faults or negatives that gig economy might have, the positives definitely outweigh the negatives. And that's why there's, tens of
Oh, yeah.
millions of people doing it and growing. And, kind of like you highlighted, all these different industries are, kind of turning to gig economy. So what do you think about the W-2 versus independent contractor debate? And, from the workers that you've talked to, what are you sort of hearing from them, and how does it impact your business?
I think it's more about like I think people like their independence.
Hmm.
I've never spoken to someone that said that they want to work for a gig platform but be an employee. I
Hmm.
think I think the most common thing that I hear is I just want higher pay so I can
Mm.
purchase my own benefits. So I think but when you tie it back to the businesses, they have their own economics and milestones that they're
Yeah.
trying to hit and investors. So it's one of those things where I think over time, both parties are just going to figure out a middle ground. And I think, I think there needs to be a third worker classification,
Hmm.
a third worker classification that appeals to like a middle ground between W-2 workers and sort of 1099s. I don't know what that looks like, but I'm sure if Washington put
Yeah.
their heads together, they could come up with that.
Oh, I don't know. We might have to put our heads together and figure it out first. But you mentioned higher pay. I think that's one thing, right? Like, I feel like it's not exclusive to gig economy. Like, everyone in every job in the world always wants to be paid more, right? Like, everyone, I think probably thinks they're worth more than they are, wants to be paid more, right? Like, obviously, money is a good scorecard for how you're doing, right? And so I think that, at the same time, drivers do like their independence. I like some of these proposals that have put forth a true minimum wage, like in New York City or the state of Washington, because it adds a little bit of restriction. Maybe drivers have to schedule some shifts in advance, but you still get to pick, right? Like you probably shouldn't be driving Tuesday at 3 p.m. in the middle of nowhere because you're not getting any rides. So it's now like you can't do that even if you wanted to, but you shouldn't have been doing that in the first place. And now there's a bit of a floor, right? Like literally you cannot earn below this. So I kind of like that hybrid approach, or yeah, like you mentioned, the third worker classification, because I think, you're never going to get best of both worlds, but I do think if you can retain some of that flexibility and independence, but then, have a minimum wage floor, for example, so no driver is ever earning $4 an hour, right? Then that seems like a positive.
Yeah, I think the other thing is also like education around all the tax breaks
Hmm.
and deductions that are available to gig workers as a result of the type of work they do. I think, for example, like, a lot of Uber people don't deduct their miles when they file their
Yeah.
taxes. They don't do depreciation on their cars that they use for work. So, a lot of these things, I feel like additional education needs to be pushed around that. That's what we can do on our end to make sure that they're taking care of themselves.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Well, I'm sure that this debate will continue to rage. So I think TLDR of this new Biden era rule, anything going to change in the near term or business as usual?
Oh, I think a lot of people are going to sue. I think it's
Mm,
supposed to go out March 11th. A lot of people are going to sue. Even there's articles out about people in the trucking space,
mm,
rallying
interesting.
together to sue on that front. So, it's scheduled to go live in March, but between now and then, I'm sure there'll be a lot more stuff popping up in the
Got it.
news about like lawsuits.
So gig workers probably won't turn into employees overnight, but there will be a lot of litigation, it sounds like. Yeah, I think that adds up. That makes sense. So
Yeah.
hopefully we'll see what happens. But yeah, anything else you want to hit on when it comes to Gig Easy or the work that you guys are doing?
No, I'm just really excited to be here. If you're a business that employs gig workers, you should be talking to us. We have all your insurance needs. It's a good retention tool, and it's a good thing to do from a corporate responsibility perspective.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think that's a good pitch. And we'll leave a link to GigEasy's website, maybe your profile on LinkedIn. If folks want to reach out directly, should they go to the website, or what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, shoot me an email, rowan@gigeasy.com. I always respond.
All right, sounds good. We'll put that in the show notes, and it's RILWAN at gigeasy.com. If you can't spell gig easy, then we'll have to
Yeah,
have a
I don't
chat
know.
about that. All right, Rowan. Well, it was really great having you on. I'm really excited about all of the work that you guys are doing to benefit drivers and platforms, and provide more insurance and coverage and benefits. So hope to
Yeah,
hear from you again in the future.
awesome. Thank you for having me, Harry.
Thanks for watching today's episode of the Rideshare Guy podcast. For more information on today's guest, please check the description. Now, you don't want to miss this interview of the Rideshare Guy podcast, so click here and also make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future ones. See you next time.